Hi, I'm Severine. Today, I'm going to tell you my story. But before I continue, please like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories like this. I'm 34 years old and I've been married to my husband Dimitri Ashford for 6 years. We met through mutual friends in Seattle, dated for 2 years, and built what I thought was a strong partnership. Dimitri works in finance, I'm a marketing director for a tech company, and we have a comfortable life together. The problem has always been Dimitri's younger sister, Calliope. She's 29, and from the moment I met her, she made it clear that no woman would ever be good enough for her brother. She was cold during our engagement, barely civil at our wedding, and over the years, her hostility only intensified. Calliope had always been the baby of the family, the princess who got everything she wanted. Their parents, Thornton and Celestine, had spoiled her relentlessly. She'd dropped out of 3 different colleges, cycled through countless jobs, and still lived at home despite being nearly 30, and somehow, everyone acted like this was fine. Dimitri's relationship with his sister was complicated. He loved her, but also recognized her flaws. He'd tried to set boundaries over the years, but his parents always intervened, insisting family harmony was more important than holding Calliope accountable. The real trouble started about a year ago when Calliope got engaged to a man named Rafferty Glenwood. He was a successful architect, stable, mature, and honestly too good for her. I wondered what he saw in Calliope beyond her surface-level charm, but I kept my opinions to myself. Calliope became obsessed with planning the perfect wedding. She wanted everything to be magazine-worthy, to prove to everyone that she was successful and desirable. The problem was, she had no money. She'd never held a job for more than 6 months, had no savings, and expected Thornton and Celestine to fund her extravagant vision. Her parents had already spent a fortune on her over the years, and were finally starting to set limits. They offered to contribute $20,000 to the wedding, which was generous, but Calliope wanted a wedding that would cost at least $80,000. She expected Rafferty to cover the difference, but he'd been clear from the start that he thought an expensive wedding was wasteful. He wanted something simple and meaningful, not a production designed for social media. This created constant tension. Calliope would have meltdowns about not getting the wedding she deserved, about how everyone was ruining her special day, about how no one understood how important this was to her. Then she turned her attention to me. Calliope started asking, no, demanding, that Dimitri and I contribute to her wedding fund. She'd show up at our house with bridal magazines, pointing out venues and dresses and flowers, hinting that we should help pay for them. "You and Dimitri have money?" she said during one visit. "It's not like you need all of it. Family should help family." "Calliope, we have our own expenses and savings goals. Your wedding isn't our responsibility." "But I'm Dimitri's only sister. Don't you want him to see me happy on my wedding day?" "We want you to be happy, but we're not funding your wedding. You and Rafferty need to work within your budget." She'd left angry that day, but I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few months, Calliope launched a campaign of manipulation. She'd cried to Dimitri about how hurt she was that we wouldn't help her. She'd complained to Thornton and Celestine that I was poisoning Dimitri against his own family. She'd post passive-aggressive things on social media about people who have money, but no generosity. Dimitri felt caught in the middle. He didn't want to give Calliope money for a wedding we both thought was ridiculously expensive, but he also hated the constant family drama. "Maybe we could give her a few thousand," he suggested one night, "just to keep the peace." "No, we're not rewarding this behavior. She needs to learn that she can't manipulate people into giving her what she wants." "She's my sister, Severine. I don't want her to hate me." "She's an adult. If she hates you because you won't fund her wedding, that's her problem, not yours." He agreed, reluctantly, but I could tell the pressure from his family was wearing on him. Things came to a head at Thornton's 65th birthday party, held at their large house in a wealthy suburb outside Seattle. It was a fancy affair with catering, live music, and about 50 guests. Dimitri and I attended, bringing an expensive bottle of scotch and a gift card to Thornton's favorite restaurant. Calliope was there with Rafferty, and I noticed tension between them immediately. They weren't speaking to each other, and Rafferty looked uncomfortable and unhappy. Halfway through the party, I went into the kitchen to refill my wine glass. Calliope followed me in, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. "About what?" "Rafferty is threatening to call off the wedding if I don't scale back my plans. This is your fault." I stared at her in disbelief. "How is that my fault?" "Because you told Dmitri not to help me. If you'd given me the money I needed, I wouldn't be in this position. Calliope, your relationship problems have nothing to do with me. If Rafferty doesn't want an expensive wedding, that's between you and him. You've turned my brother against me. You've made my whole family think I'm unreasonable. You've ruined everything. I haven't done anything except refuse to fund your wedding. You're doing this to yourself." Her face twisted with rage. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Coming in here with your successful career and your perfect marriage, looking down on me." "I don't look down on you. I just don't owe you money. You're a selfish witch. You've poisoned Dmitri against his own family. This conversation is over." I tried to move past her toward the door, but she blocked my path. "We're not done talking." "Yes, we are. Move, Calliope." What happened next occurred in a blur of motion and pain. Calliope wore this enormous cocktail ring on her right hand, a gaudy thing with sharp edges that she'd bought herself and claimed was from Rafferty. As I tried to step around her, she pulled her hand back and swung at my face with a closed fist. The ring caught me across my left cheek and temple with devastating force. I felt the skin split open immediately, felt the warmth of blood pouring down my face. The pain was blinding. I screamed. Calliope stepped back, her eyes wide with shock at what she'd just done. Blood was everywhere, on my dress, on the white kitchen floor, dripping from my face. The kitchen door burst open. Dmitri rushed in, followed by several guests. He took one look at me and went pale. "What happened?" I couldn't speak. I was holding my face, feeling the deep gash, feeling how much of my cheek was laid open. Blood was pouring between my fingers. "She attacked me for no reason," Calliope said quickly. "She came at me and I defended myself. That's not—" I tried to say, but I was too shocked, in too much pain. Dmitri drove me to the emergency room, keeping pressure on the wound while I tried not to pass out from shock and blood loss. At the hospital, a plastic surgeon was called in because the wound was so severe. Dr. Magnus Ashworth examined the laceration carefully. "This is deep and goes across several planes of your face. You're going to need extensive stitching. I'll do my best to minimize scarring, but this is a serious injury." The ring had sliced through my cheek from my temple down to my jawline, a curved gash that laid open skin and tissue. It took 47 stitches in multiple layers to close it. 47 stitches because my sister-in-law hit me during an argument about wedding money. While I was being stitched up, the police arrived. Hospital staff had reported the assault as they were required to do for violent injuries. A detective named Officer Waverly Montrose took my statement while I was still in the ER. "Your sister-in-law did this during an argument?" "Yes. She cornered me in the kitchen, became verbally aggressive when I wouldn't give her money, and when I tried to leave, she hit me with her ring." "Had she threatened you before this?" "Not physically, but she's been harassing us for months about money for her wedding." The detective took photos of my injury, collected my bloody clothes as evidence, and told me she'd be pressing charges for assault with a weapon. The ring qualified as a weapon given the severity of the injury it caused. At the house, other officers were interviewing witnesses. Multiple guests had heard Calliope yelling at me through the kitchen door. The blood evidence supported my version of events, and there was a security camera in the kitchen that Thornton had installed months earlier that captured everything. The video showed Calliope blocking my path, yelling at me, and then deliberately striking me across the face with her ring hand. It was clear, undeniable assault. Calliope was arrested at her parents' house that night. She claimed self-defense, but the video proved otherwise. She was charged with assault with a deadly weapon and held on bail. The next few days were a nightmare. My face was swollen and painful, covered in stitches that pulled whenever I tried to speak or eat. Dr. Ashworth had prescribed strong pain medication and antibiotics, warning me that I was at risk for infection and significant scarring. But worse than the physical pain was the family reaction. Celestine called Dmitri crying, begging him to convince me to drop the charges. "It was an accident. Calliope didn't mean to hurt her that badly. You're going to send your sister to prison over an accident? Mom, she attacked Severine. This wasn't an accident. Severine provoked her. If she'd just helped with the wedding like families should, none of this would have happened. Dmitri hung up on his mother, something he'd never done before. Thornton was worse. He showed up at our house uninvited, demanding to see me. Dmitri blocked the door. Your wife is destroying this family, Thornton said. Calliope made a mistake, but pressing charges, that's vindictive. She gave Severine a wound that required 47 stitches. That's not a mistake, that's a violent assault. If Severine wasn't so stubborn and selfish, the whole argument never would have happened. Get off our property, now, and don't come back. Even Rafferty tried to intervene, though he at least seemed genuinely remorseful about what happened. He called to apologize and ask if there was any way I'd consider not pressing charges. Calliope's in jail and it's destroying her. I know what she did was wrong, but if she gets convicted, her life is over. She nearly disfigured me permanently. I needed 47 stitches, Rafferty. I might have permanent nerve damage and scarring. I know, and I'm so sorry, but is prison really the answer? Yes, it is. He broke up with Calliope a week later. Apparently watching his fiancée violently assault someone over wedding money made him realize what kind of person she really was. He'd also learned from Celestine that Calliope had been pressuring him to pay for an expensive wedding he'd explicitly said he didn't want, and he was done being manipulated. Without Rafferty, Calliope's whole facade of being a successful woman with a perfect life collapsed. She was facing serious criminal charges. Her fiancé had left her, and the video of her assault had somehow leaked online, going viral in our local community. People were horrified. Comments flooded in about what kind of person attacks someone over wedding money, about how entitled and violent she was, about how she deserved whatever punishment she got. Calliope's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested. The injury was too severe, the evidence too clear, and I was firm in my desire to see this through to trial. Your face might never fully heal, the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Arabella Fenwick, told me. You have every right to want justice. The trial took place 4 months after the assault. By then, my stitches were out, but the scar was prominent and angry-looking. Dr. Ashworth said it would fade over time, but would never completely disappear. I'd always have a reminder of what Calliope did to me. In court, Calliope's lawyer tried to argue that I'd provoked her, that the injury was accidental, that she'd only meant to push me away. But the video destroyed every argument. The jury could see Calliope deliberately pull her arm back and swing her ringed fist at my face with force. They could hear her yelling about money and calling me names. They could see me trying to leave and her blocking my path. It was indefensible. I testified about the months of harassment, about Calliope's sense of entitlement, about how she'd cornered me in that kitchen and attacked me when I wouldn't give her money. I showed the jury my scar, explained the 47 stitches, described the pain and trauma. She thought she could force me to fund her wedding through intimidation, I said. When that didn't work, she tried violence. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: assault with a deadly weapon, causing bodily harm, and intimidation. The judge sentenced Calliope to 5 years in prison, though she'd be eligible for parole after 3 with good behavior. Celestine sobbed in the courtroom. Thornton looked at me with pure hatred. But Dmitri sat beside me, holding my hand, supporting me fully for the first time against his family. The aftermath was predictable. Thornton and Celestine cut us off completely, blaming me for their daughter's imprisonment. They told extended family I was vindictive and had destroyed Calliope's life over an accident. But most of the extended family didn't believe them. Too many people had seen Calliope's entitled behavior over the years. Too many had watched her manipulate and throw tantrums. The assault was just the inevitable conclusion of a lifetime of never hearing no. I sued Calliope in civil court for medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, and future plastic surgery costs. The judgment was for $350,000. She didn't have that kind of money, of course, but the judgment would follow her for years, garnishing any wages she eventually earned. Thornton and Celestine tried to declare bankruptcy to avoid paying Calliope's debts, but their assets were separate from hers legally. They ended up selling their house to downsize, unable to afford the mortgage and expenses after spending a fortune on Calliope's defense lawyers. They moved to a small condo. Their social circle collapsed, and they became bitter, isolated people who blamed me for all their problems. Dmitri struggled with the loss of his family, but ultimately accepted that supporting me was the right choice. We went to marriage counseling to work through the trauma and complicated feelings. Our therapist, Dr. Linnea Wakefield, helped us process everything and build stronger boundaries. Your loyalty to your wife when your family turned on her will define your marriage, Dr. Wakefield told Dmitri. You chose correctly. The physical healing took time. I underwent 2 additional plastic surgery procedures to minimize the scarring. Dr. Ashworth did excellent work, and while the scar is still visible, it's much less prominent than it was initially. The emotional healing took longer. I had PTSD symptoms for months, nightmares about the attack, anxiety in social situations, fear of confrontation. Therapy helped, but I still have moments where I touch my face and remember the feeling of that ring tearing through my skin. Calliope served 3 years before being released on parole. She's required to stay away from us under a permanent restraining order. I heard she moved to a different state, working minimum wage jobs, still claiming she's the victim of my vindictiveness. Thornton and Celestine never apologized. They sent 1 letter before Calliope's release, asking if we'd consider reconciliation for our family's sake. Dmitri responded with a firm no. What Calliope did was unforgivable, he wrote. What you did afterward, blaming Severine and defending Calliope's violence, was equally unforgivable. We have no interest in a relationship with any of you. I'm 40 now. The scar has faded to a thin white line that's barely noticeable, unless you know to look for it. But I know it's there. Every time I look in the mirror, I'm reminded that I nearly lost an eye, that I could have been permanently disfigured, all because I refused to fund someone's wedding. Dmitri and I are stronger than ever. We've built a life free from toxic family members who think love means enabling bad behavior. We have friends who became our chosen family, and we're happier without the constant drama. Calliope lost everything: her fiancé, her freedom, her family's money, her reputation. All because she thought she was entitled to my money and believed violence was an acceptable response to hearing no. Some people call me harsh for pressing charges. They say family should forgive. But 47 stitches bought me clarity. Some actions are unforgivable. Some people are dangerous. And protecting yourself from violence isn't vindictive. It's survival. If a family member violently attacked you and permanently scarred your face, would you press charges even if it meant destroying their life? Or would you let it go to preserve family relationships?